Good morning, and welcome to the Casey's Chamber Diversity and Inclusion Workshop Series. Today, we are excited to learn from Dr. Nicole Price. But before we hear from Dr. Price, we'd like to take a moment to thank all of our partners who made the series possible. We'd like to thank our workshop series presenting sponsor Commerce Bank, not only for sponsoring the series, but for also bringing us Dr. Price. Thank you to our presenting diversity sponsors, Community America Credit Union, Evergy, and Hallmark, and all of the other sponsors who support the KC Chamber's D&I initiatives. This year, we have also partnered with Area Chamber of Commerce to help us spread the D&I message across the chamber. So thank you to the Blue Springs Chamber of Commerce, Grandview Chamber of Commerce, Independence Chamber, Liberty Area Chamber of Commerce, Mid-America LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and the South Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your partnership. Now, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Please help me welcome Kevin Barth, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at Commerce Bank, Kansas City. Kevin?
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of the Diversity and Inclusion Workshop Series brought to you by the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. As Greg said, I'm Kevin Barth. I'm Chairman and CEO of Commerce Bank here in Kansas City. I'm delighted to have all of you joining us today as we hear from one of the region's most knowledgeable voices in inclusive leadership development. Most of us don't need a seminar to tell us how important it is to increase diversity in our workplaces. This is already a topic of frequent discussion at Commerce, where we have come to view diversity and as a competitive advantage. Because the customers and communities we serve represent many perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences, we think our workforce should as well. Most of us also understand that inclusive and diverse culture does not spring up spontaneously. It takes intentional planning and commitment, and it must start at the top. That's why I'm especially interested in today's workshop, which shines a light on the role leaders play in making sure companies' diversity efforts are authentic, effective, perhaps most importantly, sustainable. To be successful, they need everyone's participation every day. This brings us to today's speaker, Dr. Nicole Price, CEO of Lively Paradox and an expert in leadership development. I think Dr. Price will be the first to tell you that building a diverse culture can be messy. It can lead to some uncomfortable conversations. And she has lived to tell the tale. You see, Dr. Price did not begin her career with the intention of becoming an expert in inclusive leadership. She graduated college with a degree in chemical engineering. She only added a master's degree in adult education and a doctorate in educational leadership and management after spending 14 years at Hallmark, where she discovered and honed her ability to build and manage large, inclusive teams. And she's been teaching others her secrets ever since then. By 2015, Dr. Price's success as a leader, executive coach, and trainer had catapulted her onto the national stage. Since forming her own consulting firm, she has written 4 books, served as a guest lecturer at dozens of universities, from the University of Missouri Block School to Caltech. Dr. Price has delivered nearly 150 leadership workshops and seminars and inspired thousands of leaders nationwide with her strategies for inclusive leadership and development. Today, she will be sharing ideas on how we can overcome our individual biases and become more active allies in our efforts to increase and support workplace diversity. We are pleased to have you with us, Dr. Price, so welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you. I do have a few disclaimers for those of you who have joined us this afternoon. The first thing is that I am not so sure I'm going to tell you anything you don't already know. My hope is that at the end of this session, you will think that you have the ability, you, not other people, you have the ability to create a more inclusive culture more often wherever you show up. I want you to feel empowered to be able to do that every single day. And at the end of the time that we have together, my hope is that you will do at least one thing that aligns with what you think and what you feel. In order to help me make my point, I'd like to share a story about fleas. If I were to put fleas in this glass, they would all jump out. If I were to put fleas in this glass and then take and put a lid on that glass, those fleas would jump up and hit their bodies against that lid until they realized just how much it hurt. Once I had 100% compliance and those fleas started to jump just below the lid, I could take the lid off and those fleas will never jump out of that glass. And I regularly get the opportunity to ask people, do they have the ability to jump out though? And most adults know that the answer to that question is yes, they have the ability to jump out. And my next question is, why don't they? Many of you on the line are familiar with the concept called learned helplessness. It's when we have issues and challenges in the past, and those issues and challenges prevent us from being able to move forward in the future. And sometimes we imagine obstacles and lids that just don't even exist anymore. We thought they were there, but now they're gone. But the person who did the seminal research on this phenomenon actually broke the glass. Not only did he remove the lid, he broke the glass, and those fleas never jumped out of the shape of the glass. But why I'm sitting here with you today is because even the offspring of those fleas never jump out of the shape of that glass. And what does that mean for us when we are working alongside people who have had different experiences from the ones we've had? What do fleas think of other fleas who've been exposed to glasses and lids when we can't see those glasses and those lids any longer? And I think that that story and those questions have a lot to teach us about diversity and inclusion and how we can have a more authentic conversation and truly start to move the needle forward. Many of us did not create glasses and lids for people, but we have to understand the glasses and lids that exist so that we can be in the lid removal business. Last year, many of us for the first time were sparked into a level of awareness that we'd never seen before. Unprecedented amounts of time at home with our families, all focused on the media as we got to see Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper interact in Central Park. As we got to see Ahmaud Arbery jogging through his neighborhood being chased down. As we witnessed for almost 9.5 minutes, George Floyd with a knee on his neck. That level of awareness was something that I had not seen since Rodney King's incident in LA in 1992. All of a sudden, with this new level of awareness, people were calling and their question was very simple. Nicole, what should we do? People were rearing and ready to jump from this new level of awareness to action. And my caution was the same every time. We first have to think about what is it that has prevented us from knowing up until this point. And through that reflection, spend some time educating ourselves so that when we make a decision to act, that action is more likely to result in something that creates a more inclusive and a more equitable world for more people more often. And how can we know that? The only way we can know that is if we check and make sure that the outcomes that we're seeing are the kinds of outcomes that are creating the results that we said that we wanted based on what we say our mission and vision is in every single organization represented on this call. I do want to share though, that my position as an engineer does sometimes get in the way. When I say that I have an engineering degree in chemical engineering, sometimes people are impressed. When you're working in social change though, being an engineer can get in the way, and here's how. My job as an engineer was to fix problems. I identified them, and my goal was to fix them. But when we look at the social challenges that keep us in these exclusionary, homogenous spaces, people are at the heart of those data points, and people are not problems to be solved. We have to explore differently when we are focused on what it means to be able to solve the social challenges of the world. And so with that, I think I'm going to need all of you to help me. I want you to think about the rule, not the exception to the rule. Here's what I mean. When I shared the example of the fleas, of course, there were a flea or 2 fleas or 10 fleas who would jump out of the shape of the glass. But the rule was that most of the fleas were confined to the shape of this glass. So if you're thinking about the rule and not the exception, when you consider social power structures, which group is more powerful? People who are heavy or people who are thin? And feel free to go ahead and type your answer in the chat. Is it heavy people or thin people who have more social power? And as you answer, feel free to share, how do we know that? What evidence do we have that indicates that socially, thin people are more powerful? What evidence do we have of that? The media, thank you, Shannon. Angel says the media as well. The people that we see on television. Someone said it depends on what country. I love that we keep going directly to the exceptions. Discrimination laws, magazines, models. When we consider that Old Navy just recently launched a campaign to embrace as many body sizes as possible, and what they get is backlash for doing so, when 70% of women in the US wear a size 14 or above, that is an indication that there's a systemic power structure in play that values thin people. Brianna is sharing that airplane seats are not necessarily built for shoulders as broad as mine. So certainly, if you happen to fit in that 70%, your travel is going to be uncomfortable. So now, I want you to take that knowledge about the rule versus the exception to the rule, and I want you to translate it to this entire list and see which group, based on social power structure, is more powerful. And I get to ask this question at least 4 or 5 times a week, and the answers are so palpable and almost always the same. Married adults who are heterosexual, rich, not Black, male, living in urban environments with college degrees. And if we acknowledge this rule, that does not make us a good person or a bad person. It makes us a realist. And if we would acknowledge what is, we can start to dismantle the systems that keep us pitted against each other and not tapping into the resources that we all tend to bring to the table inside organizations. I believe that everyone on this line can help me on this journey. But first, we are going to have to dismantle some of the limiting beliefs that hold us back. And I want to share a few of them with you today based on my experience in the work for almost 2 decades. One of the first limiting beliefs when people are first ignited into this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion is, Nicole, let's bring people together and share stories. Now, what I don't want you to believe or to think is that stories are not important. Stories are important. It's a great way to learn about people's lived experiences and to create a sense of belonging. But I want you to think about what happens when our lived experiences are sitting on the foundation of ignorance. When people have not been made aware of things like social power structures. If people have no knowledge of the concept of learned helplessness. If people have not been experiencing what it means to be in the lid removal business, and you bring those people together to openly share their perspectives, my invitation is for you to think about what happens when we do that. So when we think about the 3 dimensions of creating a more inclusive culture, I'm speaking in broad generalizations, but we have the personal, what is going on inside of our heads, the interpersonal, what happens when we start to interact with other people. The common term is called discrimination. And then the institutional, what happens when we get together and form groups and organizations and create norms, policies, practices, and laws. Let's talk first about the personal. If I were to ask you, when you came on the planet, who taught you how to be? The common answer is my parents. And when people say parents, I pause them there. And I say, did you have 2 parents? Did you have 4 parents? Did you have one set of parents and then your parents divorced and you were then raised by step-parents? Did you have a traditional mom and dad at all, or were you raised by your grandparents? Often I will ask somebody to share if they were in the foster care system and what was that experience like? And if we're just talking about the people who reared us, in my own life, I am the 6th child of 7. It is my older sister who did most things for me. And if we're just focused on parents and who reared us, that level of difference teaches something to us all very different about how to be. So then when you start to layer in the song lyrics we listen to, the media, the billboards, the magazines we're exposed to, the teachers we're at the mercy of, our environments, very clearly, it starts to be evident that if I were reared in the country and you in the city, we learn something very different about how to be, if not just about what we can trust our neighbors to do and be and show up as. And so when we're walking through the earth and people say, Nicole, I don't have prejudice. I treat everyone the same. I say, what is more likely true is that you were told to treat everyone the same. But if I say that children should be seen and not, all over the globe, people will say heard, because we've been socialized. We have heard that term over and over again. And so when we're moving fast, when I'm angry, when I'm lonely, when I'm tired, when I'm hurt, I am more likely to treat children in impatient ways because I heard somewhere that children should be seen and not heard. Internal prejudices, those thoughts, whether we know they're there or not, guide our decisions daily if we don't work to dismantle or interrogate them. When those prejudices come out of our heads and show up in our behaviors, it is not also always negative in the ways that they show up. There are things that we favor. There are certain people who tend to get promoted. There are things that we value, and it's evident by what we celebrate, what gets evidenced on media or in the media. That is discrimination. What is also discrimination is who we tend to exclude, who we tend to bully, who we tend to devalue. So as an example, if by chance I have an internal prejudice against people with special needs, and I've never interrogated that thought at all, but at some point, I have a child who has a special need that has the ability to open my heart up and cause me to think very differently about the systems and structures that need to support people with special needs. And what I can tell you is, in that space of ignorance, before I've had that lived experience, it is very important that we keep shame low. Bringing people together in rooms with various levels of understanding about people with special needs will cause someone to say something in their ignorance that could be very, very damaging. And so part of the way that we address this at Lively Paradox is allow people to interrogate their internal biases in the privacy of their own homes. And I'm going to share some of those tools with you at the end of today's presentation. The second limiting belief is that diversity makes things easier, that we can just throw a bunch of difference in a room and hope for the best. Hope is not a strategy. To help me make this point, I want to tell you about a trip I take often with my girlfriends. We've known each other for 25 years. And when we go on this trip together, it is so easy. We can finish each other's sentences. I'm a super early riser. My girlfriends know that. They figured it out 25 years ago. So because of that, they don't ask me to go out to parties super late. And they know that I might be walking the beach at the early wee hours of the morning. And I know not to ask them to go with me because they probably have been drinking heavily the night before. But one year, one of my girlfriends wanted to invite her sister. And I want you to imagine that, like you, sometimes I screw these things up. And so we all hoped for a strategy, used hope as our strategy, just like you all tend to do inside your organizations. And so when sister showed up, what we didn't know was that she was vegan. Now, I don't have an issue with vegans at all, but I think that this sandwich would be a lot better with a nice chunk of chicken right in the middle of it. Many of my girlfriends also are meat eaters. So if you're from here in Kansas City, you might like barbecue. And if you are not a meat eater, you're familiar with some of the vegan things that we can do to create the sense of pulled pork, even if you don't want pulled pork and you do it with some jackfruit. Veganism is not an issue. I don't think positively or negatively about it. I do believe vehemently, though, that we all should get more vegetables. But that's just one point of difference for the trip. And it caused us some issues as we were thinking about where we were going to eat. There's another thing about sister, though. Sister is new to the Christian faith. Now, there are some of you on the line who know me very well. I am so Christian that at some point my parents had keys to the church. I have no issue with Christians. What I will say is that new Christians sometimes can challenge me in ways that require me to use some of my patience. So sister, while I'm spending my time eating the right things so that I can get on this trip and drink way too much and eat way too much, new Christian does not drink at all. And so now I'm feeling some kind of way about the amount of alcohol I am planning to consume on this trip. I don't have an issue with vegans. I don't have an issue with new Christians. But sister has also chosen to have her children later in life. Delightful little toddler, love her. And sister was still nursing her, which now means, in addition to trying to find a restaurant with vegan options, waking up every morning to hearing her praying so loudly she's going to convert the whole hotel. Now we have to arrange our spa dates around refrigeration for her lactation needs. I wasn't feeling it. And this is the work I do. At the end of the trip, I noticed that I was just going off on my own, having dreams and ideas about what it used to be like when we all just understood each other better and I didn't have to tiptoe around her. But what did we do? We threw a bunch of difference in a room together and we hoped for the best. Hope is not a strategy. My second invitation to you is to have a strategy. Recognize that while difference is proven, evidence-based and proven to create better outcomes, it is harder in the beginning. We have to spend time to understand, what does respect mean? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to approach change? How are we going to engage in conflict? What does respect mean to you versus what respect means to me? But by all means, don't just throw a bunch of difference together in a room and hope for the best. And if you've done that before, I'd love to hear how that's worked for you. The third limiting belief is, Nicole, we don't need to talk about this. At my son's school, they're fixing these things. The kids are better. My primary clientele are school districts. This is an example of a kindergarten assignment. Carlson and DeLosa is a curriculum, a company that creates curriculums for K through 12 education throughout this nation. In today's environment, what we are trying to get teachers to do is to engage in more culturally responsive education, which all that means is if outcomes are different for children based on any identifiable characteristic, that we will adjust our teaching methods so that we can create good outcomes for all kids. And so I just ask you to think, if we are not being deliberate about making our kids better, what are we teaching them? Not what are we telling them, but what are we teaching them? And these types of assignments are integrated throughout our learning curriculums. And why? Because we will not decide that we want to make this a focus of awareness. In the state of Missouri, there's one school district that is overtly working on this. And my question would be to you, how can we make it more school districts? And I believe that those of you who are on the call, who are owners of businesses, who are leading organizations, as you think about the next generation of talent, how can we make sure that these negative word associations are not happening at the youngest ages so that we don't have to deal with these types of discriminatory things when people show up at our doors ready to make a difference and helping us to advance the mission and vision of our organizations? If we are not aware of it, we'll miss it. We have to think about how we can raise our level of awareness. I'm going to share some very specific tools with you at the end of this presentation, and you get to decide. All of these things are invitations, not demands. You get to decide where you will or won't play as we consider how we can improve and make this world more inclusive to more people more often. One limiting belief that I would love to leave with you is that when we start doing the work of diversity and inclusion and trying to be more equitable more often, some people, those who tend to have more power, start to say, what about me? What about me? I don't want to be at the bottom of this hierarchy. I don't want to be left out. And to that, I ask you, please define the word diversity for me. In the chat, please. What does the word diversity mean? What does it mean? Differences, thank you, Nikki. Variation across, variance, yes. A mixture, difference, backgrounds, experiences, yes. And so when we're talking about differences, there is no person I've ever met who does not have something about their lived experience that allows them to bring something different to the table that causes me to think more broadly and more innovative about solutions. But when I tend to say we're going to have a session about diversity and inclusion, what do people tend to think? They don't always think difference. When we say we're going to a diversity and inclusion session, what do people tend to think? Almost always it's race, and typically it's Black. And I want you to know that while diversity does include race, diversity is not only race. And when we're thinking about what does it look like to be able to create a world whereby we can learn from married people as we can from single people, that people who live in poverty have the best solutions for being able to figure out how we can solve some of the world's most notorious problems around these issues. That if we're thinking about how we can provide technology and access in rural areas, it is probably not those people who are living in urban cores who can answer those questions. That this, my loves, is not a zero-sum game. This is not pie. As you get more, I get less. But a beautiful analogy I like to think about is, what if there's enough sun to shine on everyone? What if there is enough sun to shine on everyone? And as we think about how we can leverage the lived experiences of other people inside our organizations, that includes including everyone who has a lens towards helping us advance the mission and vision of our organizations. I'll share one minor example. If I have preferences for introversion and I am going to school as a kindergartner, it is likely that teachers, not because they are bad people, but because we have internal biases that we won't interrogate, teachers sometimes will let us know that there's something about being quiet that is not all that valuable. How do they do that? The people who speak up and raise their hands are the ones who get called on. The people who get the dominant position in the play are those of us who tend to speak up more. Those of us who get to speak at convocation happen to be those who talk, then think, then talk some more. And if I don't ever interrogate those internal biases, I might get together with other people as I grow older, and we don't know that we have these biases against the reflective people among us. And we start a business and we're hiring salespeople. What kind of salespeople will we hire? We will put in that job description, we're looking for energetic, collaborative, go-getters. What does that mean? We're looking for people whose energy we can see. And when I think about the used car business, I think about Carvana. If you're not familiar with Carvana, it's a vending machine that allows you to be able to purchase a vehicle without ever talking to a salesperson. You know why Carvana has been successful? Because 50% of US employees and people who can purchase vehicles have preferences for introversion. So in our discrimination, our uninterrogated bias, those of us who have extroverted tendencies are missing out on an entire portion of the population who would rather deal with salespeople who understand the need to be able to be reflective and allow people to think and then talk and then think some more. As we can figure out these differences that we have, what it will do is allow us to have more for more people more often, not less. This is not a zero-sum game. I have a short video I want you to watch. It's from Burger King. It's really short, but as you watch, I want you to think about what would you want to be true for you as an observer. As you watch, I want you to think about what you want for you as an observer.
Dr. Price.
Please stop. Fine. Dude, ow. Fine. Stop. Fine. Ow. Stop. Do you have any friends? Yes, I heard you. What are you even doing here? It's too easy. Stop. Come on. I get it. Maybe you are a little bit more. Oh. You think you're special? Whopper Junior meal. Dude, stop. You're fine.
I just opened it up and it's all smashed. Did you order bullied or unbullied?
Bullied or unbullied?
Yeah.
Do you have a manager that I can speak to? Because that doesn't even make any sense. Hi, how's it going? I was given this. Did you bully this burger?
Well, yeah. This is a defenseless Whopper Junior. It can't defend itself.
I don't mean anything by it.
It's just for laughs.
Just for laughs.
Just give me my burger, man. What is going on here? What are you? Is there something wrong with you?
Because that's clearly what happened.
Can't be serious. Had you seen me bullying this burger, would you have stood up and said something? Yeah. It's good to know.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah. What's your name?
Reed.
Hi, Reese.
We're just having fun.
You having fun? He's not having fun. So therefore, I think you guys should just leave him alone.
Later. This feels better to me.
Have you ever been like messed with before?
Oh my god. This is like the ideal world is where if somebody else sees like something weird happening that they'll come over and be like, hey, this is not okay.
Yeah.
To feel defenseless, that's the one of the worst things in the world. I've been that kid, so if I see it, I'm gonna do something about it. And I hope there's more people out there like that.
I find that there are two types of people when they watch that video. There are the people who make excuses for why it is okay to not do anything at all about when we observe someone being bullied. And then there are those people who say, I want to be a part of the 12%. Inside of your organizations, it is likely that people are not showing up with these egregious acts of exclusion. They are subtle acts of exclusion. Who, when we show up at the office, do we not include in the conversation? Who is it when they have an idea, we roll our eyes? Whose name is it we just refuse to get correct, even though we know how to say Roethlisberger and Stephanopoulos? Who? And who do you want to be when you observe these subtle acts of exclusion? We are all like this little boy standing at the bottom of these stairs. This is a journey, and sometimes we can't see the end of the journey. But someone has to be the person who's going to take one step to get us closer to the top. Someone has to be the person who is going to be the one to take one step to get us closer to the top. Incremental change is not inconsequential. Every single step we make gets us closer to a more inclusive culture more often. I want to take you back to this jar. When I tell the flea story, it is often that people often think that the people in the jar are those people who are heavy, those people who are single, those people who are LGBTQ, people who are Black, women, people born in the country or in rural areas, people with GEDs. But I invite you to think about, what if it's those of us who are in the dominant position who are the ones with the limiting beliefs? What if we are the ones who have been conditioned to believe that some people are better than others, that this is a zero-sum game, that somehow everyone's lived experiences are valid and informed? What if it's us? If you don't do anything else, what I want you to do is to imagine that maybe it's not the people in the marginalized groups that are the ones who are limited in their beliefs, but it's all of us who need to think through those thought processes that are not helpful and rethink a new and better way. We have a plethora of free resources available to you. If you do nothing else, I want each of you to commit to going to the implicit association test and taking at least 3 of the implicit association tests so that you can know what are you thinking when you're not thinking. I don't ever want someone to do more than what they are capable of. Courage is doing it scared. You will be uncomfortable, but discomfort does not mean unsafe. As we take small steps to standing up for people who are left out and left behind, all I'm asking you to do is to start exactly where you are, using exactly what you have to do exactly what you can. And that might be different for all of us. If you're interested in learning more about this topic and you want to do so without shame, you can feel free to visit our virtual training platform. You can sign up for $10 a month, and for $10 can walk through some of these ideas with yourself. If you happen to lead a team, we have culturally responsive leadership resources in the VT. And if you are a fast learner, you can go through all of them in that month, and it's all available to you for just a little over $10. This does not have to be as difficult as we sometimes make it. And in honor and to say thank you to the folks at Commerce Bank for sponsoring this session and for inviting me here to be with all of you today, we're offering a 20% discount that you can use by entering the code COMMERCE, and it's available for as long as you can remember the code to get 20% off of anything that we have available in the store. I am so grateful for all of you who have been here today, and I really want to know what questions you have, because we have a little less than 20 minutes to be able to address those questions. And I think as we start to broaden the minds of more people more often, that then all of you will start to think that we can create a more inclusive and a more equitable world than we found. I want you to feel inspired that you, nobody else, can help us to get there. And I hope that you will do one thing differently, including taking the implicit association test, so that we can start to dismantle these internal prejudices we have that help us to keep these systems in place that are harming all of us. I believe with everything I have that the cure to cancer is sitting in some underfunded school. And that is not hurting some of us. That is hurting all of us. Thank you. The floor is now open for questions. Where can we go to take the implicit association test? So Carmen, if you visit livelyparadox.com, the easiest thing to do is to go to the bottom of the website page, and you'll see a resources link. And in that resources link, the link to the implicit association test is there. And my personal life's mission is to get more and more people to identify and figure out what are those things that we think when we're not thinking, so we can stop upholding these systems that are leaving people out. Ryan, how do we start to convince the C-suite that diversity, inclusion, and equity are important and to prioritize them? Ryan, thank you for this question, because it does come up very often. Here's what I'll invite you to think about. If your C-suite is 10 people strong, so I'm an engineer, so I like to use math, it is likely that you have 2 people who already understand this and support it. And I want you to start there. More often than not, we tend to start with the people who are most resistant and try to bring them along. But I do buy into Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, in that if we have 26% of any group kind of thinking, feeling, and believing away, then we can really tip the culture in favor of where we want it to go. So that's number 1. Try to work with the people who are already kind of thinking about this and they want to support it. My second suggestion is also pretty simple. I want you to look at the mission, the vision, and the values of your organization. And I want you to find for me, where does homogenous, where does exclusionary practice, and where does inequitable and unjust lie within that mission statement? I have seen a lot of mission statements in my life, and I find that you can align diversity and inclusion and racial equity to mission statements pretty easily. So I don't ever hold people accountable to my thoughts. I hold people accountable to what they say. If you tell me your mission is to improve the lives of of the financial lives of people in a certain region, and I would say, well, do you want to improve the lives of only certain people? And if that's the case, then maybe diversity and inclusion is not for you. But if you want to be able to support more people more often, then diversity and inclusion aligns nicely to your mission. Another question I got is, how do we move from talking to doing? My answer to move from talking to doing is to actually create a plan, and tie that plan to incentives. And unfortunately, here in the US, what we care about is the almighty dollar. And it's not my way. I don't do this practice as part of my team. But what I do understand and know is that people, you get what you measure. And if you don't measure it, you're not going to get it. And so for those people who say diversity is just checking box and just butts and seats, my question is, how has not counting butts and seats gotten you to where you want to be in terms of creating a more diverse culture? And so moving from talking to doing requires that we decide, what is it actually we want to do? And in the same way that we create strategic plans, those plans include diversity and inclusion measures that are aligned to people's outcomes. I got a private question that came to me. Do I have any good resources that I would recommend for helping children to begin to understand these concepts? If your child is a baby, if we're talking about racial diversity, I like Anti-Racist Baby. I also think that it is important to pay attention more so to the media that your children are being exposed to. I love Disney, but as you watch Disney, pay attention to when they do things from a race standpoint, like darken the skin of the villain, and make sure that your kids are not watching those things. If you happen to be an able-bodied person, seek out books for your kiddos that have that address things like children with special needs or Down syndrome. So how can you encourage your kiddos just through play and through reading and through exposure to have a different lens than you had? And yes, that means that some of the classics you might not always spend your time on, but don't wait until you have a child with special needs to decide that you're going to seek out books about children with special needs, so that then your kids are being exposed to a lot more things. And then Ashley shared that her family loves books that are always their first to go to. And there's a company called A Children's Book About. And then you can use that as a resource. And then if you're interested in looking at culturally responsive teaching, you can learn the same things that educators learn about how to help kids learn when they happen to be different, and you can expose your kiddos to that. So Amy is asking, what's my favorite books for people who may have limited knowledge or exposure? My favorite book that attacks this idea of a zero-sum game, especially as it relates to race, is called The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. I was just recently exposed to it, and it's one of my favorites of all time. And another that I like, and I think it's important to show, is It's Time to Talk and Listen. And this is written by Dr. Anastasia Kim and Dr. Alicia Del Prado. And it tells you how to have constructive conversations about all types of difference. This is not focused just on race. But if you go to livelyparadox.com and click on the resources link at the bottom of the page, you'll see my book recommendations list as well. And my book recommendations include, if we're talking about inclusive leadership, if we're talking about wealth, if we're talking about race, one of my favorite things to do is to use personality to help people see how difference of perspective can actually be really helpful. So if by chance you decide that you're going to bring a lot of visual difference to your organization, but then you're hiring people who think just like you'll find that you won't start to reap the benefits of having a diverse culture. And this happens oftentimes in gender. So we will hire different types, different gender identities to be able to say that we value diversity. And yet then when I start to talk with those people, what I learn is what gets them promoted is showing up just like the dominant gender in that organization. We have to be very vigilant about the appearances of difference, but we're still not being inclusive of different perspectives. Greg wants me to talk about my most recent book. And Greg, are we talking about the personal book that I wrote during the pandemic? Is that what you're talking about, Greg? Clarify for me before I go there. I do want you to know that I have a book coming out at the end of September called Culturally Responsive Leadership. Many organizations think about leadership development separate from diversity and inclusion or racial equity. We think about inclusive leadership together. And so if you can help a bunch of like-minded people get along, wonderful, but good solid leadership is deciding that we are going to do the work required to help a bunch of different people be able to get along. And so Culturally Responsive Leadership is coming out at the end of September. I do believe if you go to the bookstore, you can pre-order Culturally Responsive Leadership. But during the pandemic, I did write a personal book. The title gets people caught up, but it is about overcoming the unthinkable. And when I consider what it looks like to show up every day at work and to have the amazing amounts of challenges that you all have in your industries, when you layer on that people have personal issues that are causing them challenges as well, this starts to feel insurmountable. And so I wrote a little book about how to overcome the unthinkable, and I walk through my own challenges so that you can learn from my experiences, because I absolutely value keeping shame low. And it's a book about you as an individual, if you're going to be doing this work, and less about you from an organizational standpoint. I will let you know that when I wrote Lively Paradox, I wrote it as a prerequisite to race equity work. And so here's what I mean. Race and racism as a topic is more like calculus. And most US citizens have a pre-algebra level of understanding at best. And so the book Lively Paradox is a way to help people understand things like prejudice and discrimination and oppression that doesn't have the intellectual challenge or the emotional charge that race and racism has. So then people can learn without being emotionally challenged or intellectually charged. And so then you can use that information to progress to doing more deep race equity work, and you'll be more ready. And so I'm really proud of Lively Paradox. It does have some ableist language in it. The second edition is planning to come out in 2021 so that we can fix that. In my ignorance, I am still learning as well, and I'm on this journey with you. And so I want all of you to know that. If you have questions that I did not get a chance to get around to, please feel free to share those with the folks at the Chamber of Commerce, and they'll get those to me. Thank you all so much. You have been fantastic. Greg?
Thank you, Dr. Price. As always, you are amazing. We learned so much from you. So I'm going to keep this really short. I want to thank Commerce Bank again for having you here and for sponsoring these events. Just want to remind everybody that we will continue our series on October 26th, where we will have another author by the name of Tanner Colby, and he has a book called Some of My Best Friends Are Black, and that he would be focusing on redlining. So we hope you can join us. And again, thank you, Dr. Price. amazing, wonderful, wonderful presentation, and we look forward to reading your book soon. With that, on behalf of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.